Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Community and Economic Development Committee. Would the clerk please take roll?
Batra,
Present.
Ortiz,
Present.
Kamei. Here. Vice Chair Torres, and Chair Foley.
Here.
Thank you.
I would like to note that if you intend to make a public comment, please fill out the yellow comment cards. Otherwise, we do accept public comments through email, and you can submit that to us 9 a.m. before the meeting of the date of the meeting. I just wanted to highlight that a little bit because as we remind people of how they can communicate with us. With that, let's move into the agenda, which is to first review the work plan. Does anyone have any questions about the work plan? It looks like we are deferring all three items to other times of the year. Most of them are because the committee is either not ready to present or we're trying to balance the agenda out a little bit. But they will all be coming to us this calendar year. I don't think we need a vote on the work. Do we need a vote on the work plan? We do need a vote on the work plan. Okay, do we have any?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I take public comment on the work plan then? Are there any public comments on the work plan?
We do have one public card submitted with no name. If you wanted to make your way down to the podium, you will have 2 minutes to speak.
But before you begin, we are hearing input on the work plan, the three items on the work plan that we're deferring. Is that what you're here to discuss with us, or is it open forum?
It might be an open forum.
Okay. Do you want to wait for open forum then?
That's fine.
Okay. We'll call on you. We'll be done. We go to open forum and after the committee report, which is next.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Back to the committee. Then, seeing no hands raised, and we have a motion and a second, let's vote. Thank you. There's no consent calendar. We have one item today, report on rent stabilization program strategic plan status report. Eric, I think you're going to kick us off, and we delayed this a little bit to allow you opportunity to take a look at it before we did something with it.
Thank you
Welcome.
for that. Thank you very much, Council Member. We appreciate the opportunity. So Eric Solivan, Housing Director, and I'm joined by my colleague, Emily Hissop, who's our Division Manager, who oversees the rent stabilization program. So today we're just going to talk through the strategic plan. The intent of this strategic plan is really to look at sort of three components of the rent stabilization program. How do we first stabilize our families? How do we also look at how to preserve the units? And there'll be some couple of other items that'll come before this council later this fall on the areas in which we can help preserve some of our units and stabilize our families. And then three, in response to the auditor's report from 2016, how do we best frame up a very clear and articulable strategy that is focused on the outcomes for this program on those key three areas, which are stabilization of family, preservation of units, and ways in which we engage in more productive outreach and communication so we can better administer this program. So overall, after the 2016 auditor report came out, the team has spent a lot of time, as you mentioned, Council Member, developing this strategy. And as I had an opportunity to step into this, part of Emily and I's work has been very much focused on really getting to clarity and simplification of our intended outcomes and objectives for the program. So this plan very much defines what those results we need to get to around those same three targeted metrics, which is stabilizing families, preserving units, and improving the overall communications and points of engagement with our participants in this program. And so I'm going to ask my colleague Emily just to walk us through the next few slides here that provide more detail, as there's also been a lot of data and analysis that has gone through in the creation of this plan. Emily?
Thank you, Eric. Emily Hislop, Division Manager in the Housing Department. So the focus of this 3-year proposed strategic plan is to improve data collection and measures, how we assess outcomes, and our engagement efforts with the community, and overall program administration. Just as we always have said, the draft plan does not propose any changes to the ordinance. It's really better implementation and enhancements to the existing program. So a quick overview. We've been doing this for a couple years now. The work started in summer of 2022 with the engagement of a consultant and really kind of gathering data, best practices from other jurisdictions, and then moving on to stakeholder engagement, which with both tenants and housing providers. We had a series of meetings, then report out. There was a draft plan last summer. We got feedback on the plan, did some additional stakeholder outreach, and eventually just skipping up to, we were to come in April to this committee, and Chair Foley wanted Eric Sullivan to weigh in, as he would be starting the following month. So our team worked together and we added metrics, we reorganized some things, but really refined the plan a considerable amount. And then we we presented the proposed changes to both the affordable housing and tenant advocate stakeholder group in a meeting on August 16th, and then to housing providers last week. And housing providers, we didn't receive any input to consider, and we just received some input at late last week that we haven't had time to fully evaluate and consider. So mainly, this revised plan has reorganized into 3 primary goals, and in improving the program in those areas. The strategies that we initially lined out, the tasks, they have not gone away. We've just reorganized them into these 3 areas. So as Eric mentioned before, there's the family housing stabilization. This means implementing programs and employee evaluation tools to increase the stability of families and fairness in the rental market. The second goal is focused on unit preservation, so implementing systems and operational enhancements to promote and enable unit preservation. And third, this goal did not change. We had it in the existing, and that's focused on outreach and engagement. And the purpose of that is to foster positive relationships between tenants and housing providers, and further fair housing through inclusive education and outreach to both tenants and housing providers. So each of these is organized into short-term and long-term tasks. Short-term tasks or strategies are ones we've already started implementing, and long-terms are over the 3-year period to begin work. So goal 1, these strategies and tasks are focused on addressing the financial challenges of low-income renters while also balancing the interests of housing providers and the overall housing market. The engagement tasks are related to program administration, evaluation, and data collection. Goal 2, unit preservation. This are strategies to incentivize unit maintenance and repairs. We also want to ensure families have access to safe and stable, affordable housing, and align our collaboration and compliance-related tasks with the overall objective of unit preservation. Outreach and engagement. These involve collaborating with other entities and groups, fostering opportunities to provide services and receive input from housing providers and tenants. And other goals are to increase the awareness of the program and opportunities for better communication and dispute resolution between housing providers and tenants. And that closes out our presentation, and we're available for questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment?
We have 1 speaker card submitted for Emily Ann Ramos. Please make your way down to the podium. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am with SB at Home. My name is Emily Ann Ramos, and we have been working in this long process with city staff to get this through the finish line. We appreciate the additional thought that has been put into the document and the efforts to provide clarity through structure and the references to the housing element. We plan to stay involved throughout this implementation process. We have the following comments and requests. We have concerns about the changing of utility cost limits, so we hope that there will be plenty of outreach should there be any actual changes happening. We request that the city also explores and empowers tenant associations, whether community-wide or building-based, especially when it comes to collaborating on the strategies such as 2.6. The current plan proposes to track capital improvement petitions, fair rate of return petitions, joint petitions, complaints filed by tenants, and use of mediation. We would ask that you add a metrics to each of these actions, recording any subsequent changes to tenancy. It is valuable to better understand when and how often these actions occur, but it's also important to better understand the potential impact they have on tenant households involved. So thank you so much. Hopefully we can push this through the finish line.
Thank you. We have one additional card submitted for John Betts regarding rent stabilization.
Okay, well, my name's John Betts, and so I'm trying to figure out, in a way, I don't really quite know what you mean by stabilization, but maybe you could answer it somewhat later on or something. What do you actually mean by that? It seems to be, it has to do with you're trying to find a way to, bridge the gap between the needs of the renters and the needs of the tenants and all that, and take into account all the needs of low-income tenants. And I think that's the most important thing, because just generally rents are way too high, outrageously high. So people who are paying rent are, especially if they're in the lower income brackets, it's basically they're just struggling the whole time to pay such high rents. If they're blue collar workers or retail workers, or perhaps they're mixed students or families, and some of the people are trying to do whatever work they can, in addition to some family members trying to pursue their education. So just generally rents need to be a lot lower, because right now it's like a steeplechase to keep paying the rent each month. And so that's why we have a growing more and more homeless people. And it's time to face reality that that's why there's more and more homeless people, because rents are too high. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the committee.
Thank you. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I want to thank public comment as well. I could understand how looking at rent stabilization could be confusing, because if you're a renter, there's not much stable about the rent other than it's rising, so definitely understand that. Also want to thank our housing staff for your hard work to this a very important item. Obviously, I represent District 5, which a large portion of our district is very vulnerable to gentrification and displacement, so I continue to thank our city for prioritizing this conversation. Just really quick question. Regarding the outreach, which I believe is so key, we got to make sure that we're contacting, those individuals who are vulnerable to displacement. I've seen that there has been, or staff made this possible, for a streamlined engagement for landlord meetings. I wanted to ask if there was going to be a similar effort for tenants.
You want to talk about the process of this? Yeah, the process of outreach.
Well, we do have meetings with tenant stakeholder advocates. They may or may not be tenants themselves. We do very targeted outreach in the community to where there are renters. So we try to go to them because in our past experience, if you just hold meetings, a couple people show up, it's a lot of work and and we're really making them come to us. So we already engage in an outreach strategy that targets not just tabling events at community events, but also going into school districts, schools where the English language access committees meet, and we're talking to members of the community there, cafecitos. We are really, we have a great team that is dedicated to trying to reach everybody where they might be, and each time you reach those people, they learn something and they pass it on. So that's just one of the many different tools we do in place of let's have a meeting and see who shows up.
Well, that totally understand that. You know, I have a few tenant associations in my district, Pokeway, Gramercy, and I don't think they're aware of any of these meetings. So I'd really like to partner with your office to make sure that, you know, especially our English as a second language speakers are fully participating in everything that's available to them by the city. That's it. Thank you so much.
Yes, Councilmember, we can add those groups to the list and make sure that our newly rehabbed LEP outreach program, make sure it makes connections to them.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor Kamei.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to you, Director Sullivan, and your staff for bringing forth something that is so critically important. I also want to welcome you on this presentation to CED. I think this is your first presentation to CED, so welcome, the beginning of much more. I had a few questions, you know, in terms of looking at, and I know that this is sort of the first run through, but you know, when I'm looking at, you know, the specific data that you're looking at under the family housing stabilization, your short-term strategy on 1.4 talks about capturing socioeconomic and demographic data, and you go on to say that it's captured when filling a petition or exemption request. Is that the only sources of where you're going to get the information from? Or, you know, I'm just wondering how the data collected refine our policies in line with the goals of the different ordinances that we have.
So it's a balance. Where I think we're referencing here is on petition, when we have program forms where people are coming to us to file a petition or something else. We found through our work with the Eviction Help Center too that sometimes asking too many personal questions can have the opposite effect. We really want to engage people. We do have these we log all of our interactions, and we do record at least the preferred language. So the languages that they speak and the languages that they want to be served in. But for those everyday interactions like that, it's a conscious choice to not take like a litany of, you know, what's your income, what's your ethnicity. That being said, we are engaging in a few contracts with CDBG funds, so these are not program costs. One of them is the Tenant Landlord Counseling and Dispute Resolution, neutral, and because of the nature of the funding, they do have to capture some of that data, so we will get a little more of that data from our service providers. Not all of them are going to be covered by the apartment rent ordinance or tenant protection ordinance, but most will be. And also the legal services contract to low-income renters, they also collect, a lot of information and then some, and then they all have to report back to us. So we will get a little more info there, but this is really mostly on program forms.
Okay, and you know, I know that information is in many different buckets and places, so I was really pleased to see that you're going to establish a tool for tracking the impacts and the outcomes. I think that's wonderful. I'm just wondering if you have a timeline as to when you think that might be in place, and you know, because the more information that we have in an organized place, instead of having it in many different places, it's really going to help us. So what is your timeline for that?
Well, some of the outcomes are captured in our CSA performance measures, so those we already have. I don't have them off the top of my head. We do develop an annual and a semi-annual report that goes to the Housing Commission, and since during my tenure, I've really tried to get more than just reporting numbers, like let's tell the story, let's tell them what we do, and it is our goal to get that information in a graphically presentable way, accessible on the web, so we're giving back and putting that data on. Now that we have more staffing, I'm hopeful that we are getting, in the next 6 months, more publicly available information. And at the very least, we'll be publishing an annual report towards the end of this calendar year.
Oh, that's great, that's great. But in terms of when you're saying establish a tool for tracking, I'm assuming then you have something already in place and you're just kind of using that and then going to have the report?
So a good example is we have had this rent registry for
Yeah.
5 periods. We're going into the 6th period. And now that we've had time to, we've had COVID, but take a look at what we have, what we were realizing wasn't being captured is we got, once the vacancy was turned over, when somebody moved out, but unless the landlord thinks it was specifically because, you know, they got a notice that they filed, an eviction action, a landlord might give a notice and that the tenant might respond by leaving, but it will be captured as a voluntary vacancy.
Yeah.
So we are now changing the way we track things and working towards linking up our notices that are submitted. Those databases are not linked up just for various complicated reasons. So those are the types of things that we've started tracking more, is what happens when a tenant moves out, what preceded that happening, them leaving the unit.
And I'll just add to that, council member, part of the establishment of the tracking is that the program has, as Emily had mentioned, numerous forms of data collection.
Right.
But as identified in both the city audit report, a lot of those forms of data collection are not streamlined and are not speaking to the ultimate outcomes of the program. So part of the establishment is taking those streamlines of data coming in, identifying those that get to the ultimate outcomes, as Emily is articulating, and then 2, putting those in a consistent method of tracking. Right now, the tracking ranges from Salesforce to Excel workbooks to individualized workbooks. And so we have to bring those 3 streams together in order to get to very specific and consistent reportable data that speaks to the ultimate outcomes. And that's the establishment work that is ongoing now, and its first articulation will come from the annual report.
Great, great, great. And then under unit preservation, your long-term strategy, 2.12, in terms of the petition, mediation, and hearing process, it doesn't have a lot of detail, you know, like, what does that mean? So what does that mean?
So I'll speak to that here. So when we think about unit preservation and looking at improvements to mediation hearing processes, that can take numerous forms. Specifically, why we wanted to have this be more of a catch-all language is twofold. First, when we think about preservation, there is both the functional sort of daily operation of the tenant being in the unit and what work and what streams of data we're able to capture to better understand what is happening with that data. As an example, as part of our Soft Story initiative, there was a comprehensive data set that looked to identify who are, quote, long-term tenants. And tenants, long-term tenants as defined by those 5 years or more in tenancy. And then within that specific data subset, what's their rent increases, what's been the process of interaction, how many times have they had landlord disputes, and being able to better define that, because that gives us a better sense of what is going on a more day-to-day type basis, for lack of a better adjective, between the tenant and the landlord, and is the unit being sufficiently preserved on that day-to-day basis. That's one stream. The second stream is then looking at more longer-term capital needs, since a lot of the units within the program tend to be older units, and tend to be smaller business owners who typically live within the unit. They don't have access to resources to make capital investments to preserve the unit in the long term in its useful life. And through mediation processes, by better collecting data as tenant and landlords have disputes around evictions and other issues, we're able to refine the questions being asked so we get a better insight into, okay, well, we see that there were electrical repairs. Are there bigger electrical issues within the building that need to be addressed that speak to longer term capital needs? Or if they're replacing appliance and the issue of dispute regarding the eviction was the landlord didn't provide the proper appliances, or the appliances burnt out and were not timely replaced, where are we taking that opportunity to ask those questions regarding overall appliance existing conditions within the building so we can get a better view of that long-term issue. So through those other options of looking at mediation, these other points of contact, we can get a better sense of what are short-term conditions within the unit, and then what are long-term conditions within the unit, and how do we measure that back to look at preservation options for the unit as well as family stabilization.
Great, great. Well, I look forward to, your reports back to this committee and then to the council. I think that this is a great way to go. It's a lot of work, but I certainly think that consolidating it all together and making it more usable is going to be beneficial for everyone involved. So I would like to move acceptance of the staff report and cross-referencing it to the City Council September 17th meeting.
Great, thank you. We have a first and a second. Councilmember Batra.
Thanks for that report. And Eric, look forward to having you more often here. Okay. Now, I have a comment and a question which may look a little indirect, and let me go at it. I have a meeting with the landlords in my district. There's a particular area where there are a lot more tenants and rental properties. So with those landlords, I have every 2 months a meeting, and also the tenants, a separate one, not the same one. So landlord one, we try to cover, give them some lectures on some new rules which are coming around. And one of the things in every meeting I try to encourage them is to become tier 1 landlords, so that they are providing a high quality properties for rent. People are living in something which works well, looks good, and those. And one of the comments I get back from those landlords is that, yes, we are willing to do that, and we are doing that, but you need to get us the cooperation of the tenants, that they take good care of the property and not cause us unnecessary expense and repairing things which really don't need repairs and all that. Okay, I try to carry that message into the tenants meeting as well. I can't tell you how successful I am at the moment, but I've carried that message quite a few times. Now, is any of your contacts with the community engagement, do you end up having that kind of a messaging, tenants to really take care of the property like it's their property, and encouraging the landlords to become tier 1 property owners?
I'll just respond to that briefly. So part of our communications Emily had went through the laundry list of ways in which we try to connect with housing providers and with tenants, and need to continue to expand and improve those streamlined coordinations with tenants. There's always an encouragement of an acknowledgement that we have to preserve the units, and that takes 2 parties. That takes both housing providers and tenants. And at the same time, we also acknowledge that given the average age of the units participating within the program, there needs to be investments, but given that they're also typically smaller business owners, they don't have access to capital. So where does the department play a role in bridging some of those communications, as well as we will see here in the future conversations coming up on Soft Story, where does the department and the city play a role in trying to bridge some of those capital needs? So that way we can create and foster a more collaborative environment between housing providers and tenants. So that is a consistent part of the messaging on both sides, similar to how we try to provide information to both sides. We also try to encourage certain messages, because in the end, the preservation of the units are needed in order to stabilize our families. And that's why the strategic plan really addresses both on equal footing, to say both opportunities and investments of resources and time is required from the department standpoint.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So I've been trying to give them personal attention in terms of talking to the landlord exactly what's keeping you away from becoming a tier 1 if you're a tier 2 already, those kind of discussions. And usually they've been pretty responsive that they want to get there and are working on getting there. And I think in tenants also have seen that there is a desire to be more responsive if their landlord is responsive to them. So I think that communication is helping, and I intend to keep going as long as I'm here, okay, to those meetings. So I just want to share that experience I had, Chair. Thank you very much, okay?
Great, thank you. We will have the opportunity for the full council to weigh in on this report in a few weeks as well. I want to thank you for your presentation, and Eric, welcome you to your first presentation to this committee. Emily, you've been here before, and we're not so hard to, we're not a mean group, we're a nice, receptive group. I think by focusing on the 3 areas, even though it's the same work that we're doing, reorganizes them and makes it more efficient and effective. And so I'm really happy to see that. And I'm really happy to see outreach engagement as one of the key 3 areas that you're focusing, because we often hear, either from the tenant side or the landlord side, that we haven't reached out enough when we are making decisions that impact them both. So by putting them as one of only 3 things that we're focusing on, there's a lot of things underneath there, but focusing on those 3 things really shows the community that, yes, we really are committed to outreach. And I appreciate your answers to Councilmember Ortiz. Yeah, Ortiz. That's gonna call you Peter, and that was wrong. Your questions regarding reaching out to the tenant population, because that can be difficult, and going to them is a great step in how to reach them. So thank you for that. With that, no further questions, let's vote. Thank you, that motion carries, and now we move on to open forum.
We have 2 speaker cards submitted, one without a name, and Amanda Cole. Please make your way down to the podium.
Hi, my name is James Campbell. So I just want to make a public comment. The culture of homelessness is a complex and deeply ingrained issue that goes beyond the lack of a physical home. It encompasses the daily struggles, resilience, and survival strategies of those living without stable housing. This culture is shaped by the challenges of navigating life on the margins, facing stigma, limited access to basic resources, and constant uncertainty. Homeless is not just about being without a roof, it's about being disconnected from the systems that provide security, opportunity, and dignity. The culture of homelessness often involves a community aspect, where individuals support each other in the absence of a formal social structure. There is a shared experience of exclusion, but also a remarkable resilience as people find ways to survive. In many cases, they thrive despite their circumstances. Within the culture lies untapped potential. Many who experience homelessness possess talent, skills, and knowledge that go unrecognized by broader society. They are artists, thinkers, and workers with the capacity to contribute meaningfully to the community and to the economy if given the opportunity. This is where the need for targeted economic development becomes crucial. By investing in economic opportunities within homeless communities, we can unlock this potential by empowering individuals to break the cycle of poverty. Programs focused on job training, entrepreneurship, and skills development tailored to the unique needs of these communities can transform lives And also, economic development is not just a tool for growth, it's a pathway to stability and lasting change for those who have been segregated. Creating these opportunities within the homeless community is essential to foster an inclusive economy where everyone has a chance to contribute and thrive.
Thank you. Next speaker.
So we are members of SOS, and our name has been used for other things lately. So that's Survivors of the Street, but I'm speaking as myself today. So bravo, James. When I was homeless for 10 years in my vehicle, after being well educated, coming from a very upper middle class lifestyle and a great childhood, no addictions, I thought that the no choices was killing me softly, but I guess really it was, now I've realized that being abandoned was the most painful and traumatic. So I do have experience with that, and I've also lived at several shelters, not a pleasant experience, not what I would recommend as a model. I feel like we should get to the roots of the problem. There's a movie called Finding Hope that talks about these issues that in a very expanded view, not really supporting the housing first model, though a lot of our people do feel that they want to support that, but there's also arguments against that. Changing policies is what one of SOS's mission, simultaneously housing people. I'd like to include in that, and also giving a voice to those who can't come here because their stuff might get stolen. 4 of us are VI SPDAT certified. We can get people in the housing queue now. I know many properties that have been mentioned through the years. I've been involved in this for 5 years with SOS. I've been to Cortese's seminar. He had property in Milpitas. There's a property sitting in front of Human Services that has been sitting there for years, just not being used. And people that get general assistance are given a $289 stipend for housing. There is no such thing, but there could be right there in front of Human Services, and they could pay it.
Thank you. Back to the committee.
Thank you. That concludes public comment, but James, I wonder if I could have a minute of your time afterwards. I'd like to chat with you a little bit. Thank you all for being here. This concludes the meeting. Thank you.